Okay.
Sorry, I wasn't expecting you.
I know. Sorry about that.
So the first presenter isn't here.
No.
He's from UC Irvine. So please just go ahead. I guess that's what you were going to do. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Somebody here?
I don't think anyone's there. She's.
Isn't somebody here?
Okay, good afternoon. I'm Victoria Carolan. This is my co-author, T.L. Brink. And we're from Crofton Hills College, which is a little east of here. Today I'm going to be presenting our topic, the core experience in childbirth, home birth versus hospital birth. Now, of course, we all know the great Csikszentmihalyi and his theory of flow. Basically, the theory says that if a person is taking part in an activity at which they have a high level of skill and in which they are being highly challenged, they may enter the experience of flow. In Csikszentmihalyi's own words, the best moments usually occur when a person's body or mind is stretched to its limits in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. Now, these are beautiful words, and that's a beautiful diagram, but we're scientists, so we need to establish whether this is empirically realistic. So, why did we decide to see if this theory applies to childbirth? Well, for me, it started on a personal level. This is a picture of me and my son Jacek. He's 10 years old, and we have a very close bond. However, this is a picture of him on the first day of his life. He's on the other side of the hospital room from me, about as far away from me as he could possibly get. When I gave birth, I didn't have the feeling of euphoria, as many women report having. And I was curious to find out why some women have this feeling and others don't. So, being an analytic mind and being a photographer, I decided to become an observer in the birthing room, and I became a birth photographer. So in 2011, I started photographing births. Between then and now, I have photographed over 100 births, both in the hospital and at home. In that time, I've seen a very high level of challenge. I've seen those feelings of euphoria. I've seen very low level of challenge. And I've seen some unfortunate situations in which all control was taken away from the mother. I've also seen many situations in which the baby was left alone in the corner of the room, just as my baby was. Now, this is a very important topic because just in 2018 alone, there were almost 4 million births. This is millions of women every single year who are being psychologically affected by this one experience. So we decided to go with the guiding question: is Csikszentmihalyi's model of flow applicable to the woman's experience of childbirth? Specifically, can Csikszentmihalyi's model of flow appreciate differences between hospital births and home births? From here, we came up with 3 hypotheses. Hypothesis number 1, women will report a greater requirement for skill for home births. Hypothesis number 2, women will associate hospital birth with anxiety and worry. And hypothesis number 3, Women will associate home birth with control and flow. We used a survey. We had 34 participants. Of these participants, 10 were midwives, 9 were midwives in training, and 15 were either pregnant or postpartum patients of these midwives. Almost half were under the age of 30, a handful were in their 30s, and 14 were over the age of 40. We decided to use these main 4 questions: the number of home births each participant had experienced, the number of hospital births each participant had experienced, her age at her first home birth, and her age at her first hospital birth. And then we use the dimensions on the flow diagram. So we asked each participant for her home births, what level of challenge did she feel and what level of skill did she experience? And for her hospital births, what level of challenge did she feel and what level of skill did she feel that she needed to show? Finally, we showed each participant the list of 8 adjectives from the flow diagram. And of course, these are anxiety, apathy, arousal, boredom, control, flow, relaxation, and worry. And we asked each participant to circle which adjectives she experienced during her hospital births and which ones she experienced during her home births. I saw the opportunity to conduct the survey when I was asked to take pictures for the website of the California Association of Licensed Midwives. They wanted to show the public what midwifery looks like. So they set up an event and invited midwives, midwifery students, and patients to show basically what the appointments look like and asked me to take pictures. So I'm going to show you a few pictures of what kind of people were there. There are newly expectant parents, new parents, and very experienced midwives, very experienced parents, and midwives teaching midwifery students. We had one challenge in that almost every participant had experienced a hospital birth and almost every participant had experienced a home birth. However, not every participant had experienced both. So we couldn't use a repeated measures design and instead had to treat them as separate but overlapping groups. In our data analysis, we used the JAS program, mostly for correlation coefficients, such as the Spearman-Rowe rank order coefficients, and the Mann-Whitney and Crosswell-Wallace tests. We needed to use some other statistical tools, so we used the Vassar Stats website for the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test and the resampling procedure to compare groups. Finally, we used the GraphPad QuickCalc website for the Fisher exact probability test. And here are the results. First, we looked at the total number of births for hospital and home. As you can see from the numbers, there's really not much difference. We didn't find any statistical difference here. Next, we looked at the age at the first birth for the participants. It looks a little bit like home birthers are a little younger. However, considering the small sample, we didn't find any statistical significance here either. And next, we looked at the 0 to 10 scale of challenge for hospital and home births. Looks like hospital has a little more challenge, but again, we could find no statistical significance on this one. Now this changes when we come to our hypotheses. Hypothesis number 1, women will report a greater requirement for skill for home births. It looks like there's quite a difference. We see a small standard deviation and we found excellent significance here. The participants definitely see that home births require more skill than hospital births. We next looked at the adjectives. These first 3, apathy, arousal, and boredom, actually just weren't selected much at all for hospital or home births, so we couldn't find any significance with those 3. For hypothesis number 2, which is that women will associate hospital birth with anxiety and worry, you can see right away that there's a big difference here, and we found excellent significance. Hospital births are definitely associated with higher levels of anxiety and worry. Now we've already seen that home births are associated with higher skill levels. Therefore, hospital births will be lower on the skill level. We've seen that hospital births are slightly higher on challenge. This puts us right in anxiety and worry, which is exactly what we found. Hypothesis number 3, women will associate home birth with control and flow. Again, you can already see a huge difference just based on the numbers. Over 2/3 of the participants associate home birth with control and flow, and well over half of them associate it with relaxation. We found excellent significance here. Now, knowing that we've already seen that home birth is associated with high skill, that shows us flow, control, and relaxation, and that's exactly what we found. So we found here that Csikszentmihalyi's flow theory applies to our birth study. We found that home birth is associated with flow, control, and relaxation, and hospital birth is associated with anxiety and worry. We're hoping that our future studies may be able to show some link with grit or growth mindset, or even that experiencing home birth could lead to a growth mindset. That there could be a link with higher happiness or flourish. Our future studies will use qualitative methods such as focus groups, ethnographies, and even interviews, and this will be in addition to quantitative methods. And we're hoping that with this we can explore the process of how subjects make decisions in this area. Of course, we would like to redo this study using a larger sample, more operational definitions, and more sites. And we're hoping that with this we will be able to put the pieces of the puzzle together. We're very excited about this because we believe that we found that Csikszentmihalyi's flow theory applies to the topic of childbirth, and this is millions of women every year who could be positively psychologically impacted by our study. Again, this is the flow experience in childbirth, home birth versus hospital birth. This is our contact information. Thank you for listening. Any questions?
Did you find, or did you look at the variation in demographics of the women that you looked at, the actual mothers who were giving birth? In other words, or maybe socioeconomic status. So do more people have birth? Like you said, the women under 30 were more likely to have births at home. Is there anything theory or reason why that is? Is it just the emerging culture, or?
We actually didn't look that far into it yet. We didn't have a large sample this time, and I'm working on getting a much larger sample for us to redo the study. So we're hoping to be able to look into more of the variables in the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. I have another question if other people. So when you use the word control, could you define a little bit what you mean by that word? Is it like, do people think they have more control at home versus hospital because they get to call the shots, or they get to do a birth in the way they want to do it versus following sort of clinical rules of the hospital?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could tell you from my own observations. I showed the picture of the woman who was being wheeled away in the chair. From my observations, I see that a lot of women are manipulated into believing, I mean, they're literally told, your baby will die if you don't do this right now. And I've never seen that at a home birth.
Mm-hmm.
So I do believe there's manipulation involved, and so women who have home births tend to do a lot more educating themselves and therefore feel more in control of their own body. Midwives generally don't do much at all. They generally stand back unless they're needed, and the woman just births on her own.
In the hospital? Or in both? At home, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I see, I got it, okay.
Let me follow up on the question of the operational definition of control. This was very simple, a simple adjective checklist on a questionnaire. Circle each of the words that pertain to your experience in a home birth, your experience in a hospital birth. So in that sense, this is a very limited surface measure. And if you go back to the discussion, we share your concern. What exactly do each of these adjectives mean? Are these words adequate to convey the complexity and the texture of the entire experience? And that's why we are suggesting more of these qualitative techniques, such as a focus group, where the women can actually expand with their own narrative what the experience was like.
Yeah, so more the lived experience.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you, it's really interesting.
We're excited that it measured out with the chart, and we want to go from there to go more deeply into it to see exactly what the women were thinking.
Do you think about looking at, my daughter's childbearing age and has had 2 kids, and all of her friends are doing the same, and there's all of these sort of war stories about what happens to them when you have a positive birth experience, you have a positive post-birth experience, it seems like. And so are you thinking at some point of looking at that? Like you were describing your experience as being, my son was across the room and that wasn't okay. And I'm just wondering if that affected or impacted the first weeks of your motherhood.
There's definitely a lot of factors to look into here. It's not a simple scenario at all.
Okay.
I mean, you have to look at the hormones and the situation. This is definitely stuff we can look at in the future. Right now, we're not quite at that point. So far, we're gonna take this next step and see where that takes us.
Yeah, no, it's really, really great.
I have some other students who are doing research on tangential topics such as C-sections, such as breastfeeding, and if there's one theme that I've seen running through these studies, I don't know whether we want to call it control or autonomy or the local agency would be another great topic, but where the woman has more of that kind of control, power, the total outcome seems to be better. We've tried, different kinds of measures, but I'm always going to say, let's take a look at the qualitative technique. I think another great study that Victoria or some other one of my students might be interested in doing would be something involving like a women's postpartum depression group, and sort of take a look at the dynamics of what is going on in terms of the intergroup relationship and the intrapsychic healing that these women are experiencing. And I like your idea of relating that back to the experience right at the moment of birth or even for the preparation of birth.
I'm not trying to add to your study. I think this is really great that you had that way of looking at it versus chicks left behind.
There's so many directions it could go in, and you know, a lot of people don't know this, but it's been shown that home birth is safer than hospital birth. And most people think that hospital birth is safer just because you're going where the doctors are, and it's just not the case. So a lot of hospital births involve interventions one after the other, and these come with risks, infection, and you know, they do give you medications and hormones, and all this stuff affects your bonding, and yeah, so it doesn't take much of a leap to think that it could go there.
Okay, thank you.
Following on what you just said, are there studies on home birth versus hospital birth and depression or anxiety after giving birth?
Anxiety after giving birth?
Well, most people talk about depression, but we know that after birth and during pregnancy, mothers can experience different anxiety, depression, psychotic symptoms.
I actually don't know if any other studies have been done, but it would be good to look into. It seems like after birth would be a good place to go after this.
Any other questions? I mean, we have the whole hour. I guess our first presenter hasn't shown up yet, so I mean, we can use that time for discussion, but if there are no other questions, then we can just wrap up.
Yes, we really appreciate getting your suggestions about where we can go next. I mean, Victoria is really committed to this topic and the different aspects of it. So this is not something that she's just doing for one little conference. She wants to continue on with this particular topic. I hope some of you also are interested in this kind of topic.
Came a little late, but from what I understand, the home birth, you're saying that home birth is safer than hospital birth?
Yeah, they've found in studies over the last couple of years that it actually is a little safer.
Does it change with the country or with culture?
So far I've only looked at the US. I'm about to start thinking of looking at other countries. It's on my radar to start looking at Mexico, but I haven't quite got there yet.
And with the women that give birth at home, was it checked if they prepared themselves better to give birth than the ones that were going to the hospital? Because they were thinking that, well, the doctor will take care of it, but the other women were going to like pregnancy yoga or meditation.
Yeah, we didn't ask them those questions. In my experience, I see that that's generally the case. So I can only tell you anecdotally that appears to be the case to me. I guess that could be another thing that we look into. If that leads to a greater feeling of control, that would be an interesting thing to look into.
All right, thank you, Victoria. So as I mentioned before, guys, our first presenter, I guess we have not found our first presenter, so feel free to go pop into other sessions.